Critic of Palestinian Authority dies during arrest. Death comes as rights groups as Israeli police have committed ruthless excessive force against Palestinians during arrests. An outspoken critic of the Palestinian Authority who intended to run in parliamentary elections before they were cancelled earlier this year died during his arrest by PA forces on Thursday. Nizar Banat, 44, was a harsh critic of the Palestinian Authority, which governs parts of the Israeli-occupied West Bank, and called on Western nations to cut off aid to it because of its growing authoritarianism and human rights violations. In a brief statement, the Hebron governorate said Banat's health deteriorated when Palestinian forces went to arrest him early on Thursday. It said he was taken to a hospital where he was later pronounced dead. The specific circumstances of his death remain unclear. According to his family, Banat was in bed when about 24 PA officers broke into his house in Hebron and started beating him. He was dragged away screaming, local media quoted them as saying. In early May, gunmen fired bullets, stun grenades and tear gas at his home near the West Bank city of Hebron, where his wife was inside with their children. He blamed the attack on President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party, which dominates the security forces, saying only they would have access to tear gas and stun grenades. The Europeans need to know that they are indirectly funding this organization, Banat told the Associated Press in May in an interview at home where he was hiding out. They fire their guns into the air at Fatah celebrations, they fire their guns in the air when Fatah leaders fight each other, and they fire their guns at people who oppose Fatah. Wave of criticism. Banat also accused prominent Fatah supporters of waging an incitement campaign against him on social media, in which they accused him of collaborating with Israel, a serious allegation that in the Palestinian territories amounts to treason. He denied the accusation. Earlier this week, Palestinian security forces detained a prominent activist and held him overnight after he unleashed a wave of criticism at the PA on Facebook. Issa Amro is an outspoken critic of both Israel and the PA, and has been detained by both in the past. A recent poll shows plummeting support for Abbas, who cancelled the first elections in 15 years in April when it looked like his fractured Fatah party would suffer another humiliating defeat to Hamas, the group ruling Gaza. Hamas drove out forces loyal to Abbas when it seized power in Gaza in 2007, after being democratically elected in 2006, and the Palestinian president was mostly sidelined during last month's 11-day Israeli assault on Gaza. Western nations continue to view Abbas as a key partner in the long moribund peace process, and the European Union has provided hundreds of millions of dollars in direct aid to the PA over the years. Earlier this week, the EU signed an agreement to provide $425 million in loans to the PA and Palestinian banks to help them cope with an economic crisis exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic. Ruthless excessive force. Meanwhile, an Amnesty International report released on Thursday said Israeli police have committed a catalog of violations against Palestinians in Israel and occupied East Jerusalem. It accused the police of carrying out a discriminatory repressive campaign including sweeping mass arrests, using unlawful force against peaceful protesters, and subjecting detainees to torture and other ill treatment. The report was based on the testimonies of numerous witnesses and 45 videos and other forms of digital media to document more than 20 cases of Israeli police violations between May 9 and June 12. The organization said its findings showed Israeli police also failed to protect Palestinian citizens of Israel from premeditated attacks by groups of armed Jewish nationalists. Up until June 10, Israeli police had arrested more than 2,150 people, 90% of whom were Palestinian citizens of Israel or residents of occupied East Jerusalem, according to the Palestinian human rights group, Masawa. Some of the cases the report documented included that of 17-year-old Mohammed Mahmoud Keelan, who was shot in the head near Al-Fahim, northern Israel, on May 12 and died a week later. It also documented the case of 15-year-old Jana Kizwani, who was shot in the back as she entered her home in Sheikh Jarrah on May 18. Her father, Mohammed, told Amnesty that her vertebrae were shattered and doctors do not know if she will walk again. The evidence gathered by Amnesty International paints a damning picture of discrimination and ruthless excessive force by Israeli police against Palestinians in Israel and in occupied East Jerusalem, said Saleh Hijazi, Amnesty's Middle East Deputy Director. This discriminatory crackdown was orchestrated as an act of retaliation and intimidation to crush pro-Palestinian demonstrations and silence those who speak out to condemn Israel's institutionalized discrimination and systemic oppression of Palestinians. Amnesty has called on the UN Human Rights Council's Commission of Inquiry to investigate violations by Israeli police against Palestinians.